Hi, Angela Alston with Angela Alston Astrology. Thank you for joining us today. We're going to be talking about Saturn's opposition to Mercury, which is perfecting today, but we've probably all been feeling it the past few days. It's one of those, first of all, it's something that we're all going through. Which is kind of helpful. We're all in the same boat kind of way. Um, but to kind of guide us through this discussion, let me share my screen and walk through how this is showing up in the different houses. So I'll do a slideshow from the beginning. So once again, Saturn in opposition to Mercury. Saturn is in Pisces. Mercury is in Virgo. And we're going to be walking it through the houses. And so you can follow along with what your rising sign is. And if you don't know what your rising sign is, you can go to astro.com, AstroSeek, or you could ask your friendly astrologer. So a couple kind of opening remarks about Saturn in opposition to Mercury. Saturn is currently retrograde, and I've found over the years that retrograde planets can sometimes lean into their shadow sides. So they're not always showing up in the best way that they can. Saturn is in early Pisces, where it has only face dignity, and this is a minor dignity. And Saturn is the great malefic. And so with very little dignity and retrograde, Saturn could be being a little bit naughty. And so house placement, what we might call accidental fortitude, if it's in a strong house, can strengthen its malevolence sometimes. And so where it's showing up, will really matter. On the other hand, Mercury in Virgo is very strong in essential dignity. It is in rulership and exaltation, and it has term dignity. So Mercury is functioning at its height right now. And Saturn really isn't. And they're locked in opposition. And opposition has the nature of Saturn. It is a fairly difficult aspect. It's one that is confrontational without the ability that the square has to have creative resolution. You have just two things, and compromise between them really takes effort. On the other hand, it can really bring things to light. Think of the opposition, which is also happening today, by the way, with the moon and the sun. When the moon is at opposition to the sun, it's at its fullness. It is at its strength. It is as bright as it's going to be. And so all that to say, in this kind of showdown between Mercury and Saturn, Mercury is essentially stronger, but Saturn can never be ignored. And that's just the bottom line. Saturn in opposition to Mercury kind of invites us to, or forces us to face our fears. Saturn rules fear, constriction, what limits us. And limits are very important. Saturn is my favorite planet. I am very much a daughter of Saturn and have worked with it, been in conversation with it my entire life. And more on that later. Saturn in opposition to Mercury gives you a chance to test your thoughts and ideas, see if they hold water or see if they end up falling apart. And Saturn in opposition to Mercury helps you deal with rejection. Saturn can be the big no. And sometimes that no is incredibly important, because what's always the truth is that Saturn, like all the planets to a certain degree, it is here to make you the best that you can possibly be. And some of the gifts of Saturn and of this particular opposition is mental toughness. You will emerge from it with stronger ideas and a better understanding of what needs to be refined in your approach to a problem. It gives you the opportunity to learn to trust your own authority. And it certainly, practicing with Saturn certainly gives you resilience and humility. And both of those traits are incredibly important to be a well-functioning, a high-functioning, adult in the world. And Saturn, I should mention this, also has a lot to do with maturity. Mercury rules childhood, Saturn rules old age. This opposition really helps you grow up, level up, and grow up. So let's look at it with Aries on the ascendant. And we're going to see that the chart changes a little bit as we go through the different signs on the ascendant, because they're happening at different times of the day. But all of these charts are equal house, and they were cast for today, August 1st, 2023, which is when this aspect perfects and then will wane, although it'll be felt and the lessons from it will be absorbed, over the next coming weeks. So Saturn on the ascendant, or Aries on the ascendant rather, brings the Saturn Mercury opposition into your 12th and 6th house. The 6-12 axis is the serve or suffer axis. I'm a traditional astrologer, and one of the things that means is that traditional astrology recognizes that there's suffering in the world and does not try and soft soap or put lipstick on a pig. Sometimes suffering is just suffering. There are hard times and hard places in the chart, and they're there for a reason. And I'm not going to get into right now the theory behind it. There's lots of other astrologers who've spoken to that at great length and very eloquently. But that's what a traditional astrology is about. It's very practical and pragmatic in that way. And the 6-12 axis is tough. There's really no way to spin it otherwise. And with Saturn in your 12th, showing up in Pisces in your 12th retrograde, you might be dealing with self-defeating and very habitual thought patterns. Those types of unconscious narratives that really undermine you. You might be fearful of your own subconscious and what's hiding out in there. This is a time when sleep can be very disturbed, bad dreams, and communication is hard work. Mercury is in Chariot in the 6th house, and 6th house is the house of work, not of career, but of drudgery. Sometimes clear communication is so difficult to come by, and sometimes that's because it's you yourself that is getting in your own way. And so this is an opportunity to really to face and really start to dismantle some of that negative self-talk. Moving on, let's look at Taurus on the ascendant. This is a very different type of vibe. Here we have Saturn showing up in the 11th house and Mercury in the 5th house. This is Jupiter's joy at the 11th and Venus's joy. And we're still dealing with Saturn in opposition. And so some of the themes that might be arriving for folks or people who have Taurus on the ascendant might be a sense of criticism from your friends and network. You know, you might have friends that are throwing you shade and you really don't understand why. Your hopes and dreams can feel really squashed right now. 11th house is the house of hope and dreams, of ambition. It's rising up to the pinnacle of the 10th house. And Saturn there, it can make you feel like your hopes and dreams are never going to happen. Another thing is that your entrepreneurial efforts, 5th house is the house of entrepreneurism. They could really be feeling stifled right now, you know, kind of stalling out. You might be wanting to start a new website or a new business or a side hustle and just feel like it's not gaining traction. It's not gaining the traction that it should. You've got a great idea, right? Mercury and Chariot in the 5th house. The idea is solid. Why isn't it catching on? What's going on? Well, one of the things, 11th house is benefactors. You might find that the money from funding a grant, funding for your art is not coming through. It's stalled. And then the 5th house is also the house of romance, of dating. Mercury there wants a lot of action. And 11th house, Saturn, which rules apps. Why aren't the dating apps working? You know, the well from the apps might have seemed to have dried up, you know, during this period, and that's no fun. And here we have Gemini on the ascendant. Gemini on the ascendant brings Saturn into the 10th house and Mercury into the 4th house. So there might be this chasm between your public persona and your private life. Your private life might be going very well. In fact, again, Mercury is very strong in Virgo. And yet, you know, publicly, it might not be as pretty a picture. It might also manifest with, as in conflict with your boss, with the authority in your life, whoever's over you in some way. And then activity at home could really be a challenge to career responsibilities. And right now, you may want to recede, rest, recuperate in the home, in the 4th house, a quiet place, a hidden place. You might not feel like being out there, but Saturn in opposition to that Mercury is telling you duty calls. Let's move on to Cancer on the ascendant. And here we have Saturn showing up in the 11th, the 9th, and Mercury in the 3rd, the 3-9 axis. Now, Saturn in the 9th can be a reality call that it's time to abandon a business venture. It could also be bad agents, lawyers, advisors, astrologers, priests who are not up to snuff, right? They're maybe a little bit crooked. Saturn in Pisces in retrograde is not showing up with its best behavior. And 9th house is the house of legal and religious and spiritual advisors. And then you might find during this time that there's sort of an authoritarian restriction on your personal belief system. And that can be very, very hard. With Leo on the ascendant, we have Saturn and Mercury in opposition across the 2-8 axis, the mind, your resources, and Saturn in this configuration is showing up in the 8th. You could be denied a loan. You could have a bad mortgage rate. Contractual negotiations could reach a bit of a standstill, a deadmate, and your money situation could be negatively impacted by your partner's poor financial situation. Saturn Pisces retrograde is in the house of your partner's finances. And that could be business partner as well. So yours might be doing okay, but you're linked, right, because of the partnership. And so you could be taking a financial hit during this time for reasons that really aren't your fault. And that can feel hard. Virgo on the ascendant brings Saturn, Mercury in opposition across the 1st, 7th axis, the myself and the other. And Saturn showing up in the house of the other. 7th house rules business partnerships as well as personal partnerships. And it could be that your business partner is giving you the squeeze, right? Things are not going well with your business partner at this time. It could also be a relationship, a more personal type of partner. And you've reached a point where compromise seems unlikely. That could change tomorrow. It could change as soon as this kind of breaks up and dissipates. But right now, compromise has been difficult to achieve. And here you'll see Mercury is in the 1st house, very strong. You're strong in what you're saying, what you're bringing to this. But your partner is not feeling it. And then I forget which astrologer has talked about oppositions being a bit of a shock. They can manifest outwardly as a bit of a shock to the person, to the system. And with Saturn in the 7th house, you could be shocked at this time by the emotional stinginess or the passive aggressiveness of your partner. It could come as a real hell of a surprise. Now we have Libra on the ascendant. And now we're going to be going through the axes again, but Saturn and Mercury have switched. And so the script flips a little bit. Some very, similar vibes, but it might it shows up a bit differently. So with Libra on the ascendant, Saturn is now in the 6th house of work, of health, of drudgery, and Mercury is in the 12th house. This could be a sense of being truly overwhelmed by the sheer amount of work that you have to do. Heavy responsibilities can lead to burnout and psychological exhaustion, meaning that you would have to kind of retreat. The 12th house is a place of hospitalization, imprisonment. Some see it as a place of spiritual retreat. But that is, again, kind of putting a positive spin on a space that is not a particularly positive space. And with Saturn in your 6th, in Pisces, aches in your joints, if that's something that you've been susceptible to, or if you have a chronic, illness, that manifests as aches in your joints. Saturn in Pisces rules aches in your joints. The sixth house is the house of disease. That could really be being triggered right now, and that could enforce a time out. Scorpio on the ascendant brings Saturn, Mercury in opposition across the 11-5 axis. And here we have Saturn in the 5th house, Mercury in the 11th house. And here it's you who might not have the bandwidth for your friends right now. You may want a romantic situation to be more serious than it actually is. And you may be feeling left out of fun, or you may have to make the adult, mature choice between buckling down and doing the work, or out having fun with your friends and with your network. Creative work right now can feel very hard. It can be serious. It can be bringing you to some very deep and isolating places. And with Saturn in the 5th, which rules creative work, but also children, you may find that you need to create some boundaries for your kids right now, or for yourself when it comes to partying. Saturn in the 5th in Pisces, it's a time when you might be reevaluating your relationship with alcohol. Now let's move on. Sagittarius on the ascendant brings Saturn and Mercury in opposition across the 10-4 axis, with Mercury in the position of strength at the top of the chart, which many astrologers say is the strongest point in the chart, and Saturn in Pisces in the 4th hidden. You may be experiencing a career peak at the moment, but have some serious responsibilities at home that the rest of the world really may not have visibility to. And your public persona, how you're showing up in the world and in your career, you may seem extremely capable, able to juggle it all. But in reality, you might feel like you're drowning, or I said pedaling like crazy to keep afloat. Mercury in 10th can also be news that comes to light, right? News that comes to light about you that is personal and private in nature. And then on a very kind of practical, pragmatic level, Saturn in Pisces retrograde in the 4th could be as simple as your house has issues. 4th rules your actual house as well, has issues that cannot be deferred anymore. The time has come to deal with perhaps deferred maintenance. Your house is calling your attention, and it is pulling you into its space. Capricorn on the ascendant brings Saturn and Mercury in opposition across the 9-3 axis, with Mercury in the 9th and Saturn in the 3rd. And this can manifest as hard time communicating honestly and transparently. You may be struggling to find the right way to express your political, social, or religious beliefs. This has always been a challenge, and in the day and age that we're living in right now in the United States, it is a true challenge to be able to show up and express yourself in what's becoming a very authoritarian state. Pisces, 3rd with Saturn retrograde, gossip and lies might be surrounding you right now. Another issue is that you could have an exciting journey that you're thrilled to embark on, but you're being delayed because of official documents, right? You don't have the paperwork that you need. And Saturn in third retrograde Pisces, you could have troubles with your neighbors and troubles with your siblings. Aquarius on, wait, I didn't get the Aquarius slide updated correctly. I will come back and do that. But let's go to Pisces on the ascendant. Pisces never gets to be anything but last. So we'll do Pisces and then I'll do Aquarius in the talk through. Sorry about that, guys. So with Pisces on the ascendant, you have Saturn in the first house and Mercury is showing up in the house of the other. So you may find yourself withholding and protecting yourself right now. You might feel like you don't have a lot to give, to tell the truth. You might have some low energy. First house is the house of vitality, the house of health, the house of the self. You might have some low energy, feel very lethargic, exhausted, while your partner, appears awfully spry. Virgo's over there, full of energy at its very height. And this can also be about projecting onto the other your own self-doubt and your own fears. And Saturn in the first, you have a sense that you're getting older, right? You might look in the mirror and not really love what you see. You might feel conflicted about the maturing and the aging process. And that's a tough place to be. So let's talk through Aquarius on the ascendant would bring Saturn into the second house and Virgo into the eighth, Mercury into the eighth house. And here you might feel like your partner has the upper hand when it comes to finances, kind of the inverse situation of what we had talked about before. Your finances might really be in the shitter right now, and your partners are doing fine, and you're kind of bringing you both down. That can be very, very challenging. There's an imbalance between mine and ours, and you're feeling on the short end of that stick. Saturn in the second can also be really tough issues with self-worth, with feeling of what you value in yourself and in the world. You might really be questioning right now your own value and just questioning your value system in general. And then with the surprise that can come up, you might be shocked by something to do with your loans. You might be confronted with financial information that is really unwelcome, and that's going to make you have to make some very tough decisions around your own personal resources. So Saturn in opposition to Mercury, I mean, it's tough no matter how you slice it, especially when Saturn is not, at its strongest. But I will say that these times with Saturn, these struggles with Saturn, give you the opportunity to forge yourself, because it's during times of doubt and fear and struggle that you learn how strong you really are, right? You learn how to become an adult and to step into that next phase of your identity. You learn about yourself when it comes to Saturn. And the notion is that you're always have free will, and that life is a process of continuous improvement. So I wish you the very best with this transit. We're all going through it. Remember that you are not alone. And if you want any advice or to talk anything through, I am always here for you. Angela Alston Astrology at gmail.com. And then my website, www.angelaalstonastrology.com. And if you would like this video and share this channel, I would really appreciate it. It'll help me grow. I wish you all the very, very best. We stop this share and say goodbye.